Wow.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We love it when we have a big crowd of people. This is awesome. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Monday, June 3rd to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I know we have many guests here tonight for a variety of things and RTM members, but are there any members of the public that wish to make public comment this evening? Now is your chance. Any members like to make public comment this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our business. First order of business is to receive a final report on the Darien High School cafeteria project from Chairman Jill McCammon. Hi, Jill. And we have members of the Building Committee, Board of Ed Building Committee here. I don't think I see Mr. Palin, who is also on your Building Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for having me again, and for the last time, in this capacity anyway. You have three sets of documents from me. One is just a presentation, which starts with a picture of the exterior of the cafeteria. One is our finances, and then there's some pictures. Just so you know, I'll refer to each one, but I'll start with the presentation for now. Okay. So if you'll turn to the first page of the presentation. I'm sure you all recall, our original scope, we were formed to renovate and expand the high school cafeteria with three goals: to expand the use from 302 to 420 seats, to improve the acoustics and lighting of the space, and to allow for flexible use of the space. Our construction was originally scheduled for April of 2018 to end in time for school in August of 2018, and our budget was $1.689 million. If you look at the financial spreadsheet that you have, on the upper left-hand corner under original appropriations highlighted in yellow, you can see the $1.689 million. So
Yes,
Yep. Okay. All right. So our project team, as Jamie just referred to, was a building committee, 9 members of the Board of Education and 1 member of the Board of Finance, in Jim Palin. Our supporting staff were school administration, the town finance director, Jen Terneski, town administrator, Kate Bush, and we certainly thank everyone I have just mentioned and I'm about to mention. Our architects were KG&D. Our owner's representatives were CREC. Our contractor was KSR, or Cronenberger and Sons Restoration. We were also supported very ably by TV 79. And of course, we had additional support from the fire marshal, building department, and park and P&Z. Okay, so as many of you will recall, in April of 2018, when we broke ground, we found a duct bank, and I did decide you might want one more picture, which, as you may recall, it was a filled trench of approximately 3 feet in width and 1 feet in depth at varying distances from the building, and the size of it meant that we could not move forward without actually moving the line first. On top of that, Eversource confirmed that the line had to be moved regardless because the way that it was built was not to code. So to protect this project as well as any future expansion projects, we went ahead and moved the line, but it was not part of our scope. So in April of that year, later in the month, you all approved an increase to our scope, and you approved it based on the fact that we already had a project team in place. It was more operationally efficient to coordinate movement of utility lines with the cafeteria of expansion. We walked through the budget, safety considerations, coordination, and we thank you. If we look at that date, 4/24, that's just several weeks after we found the first duct bank. So I have to say we need to be proud of our government for moving so quickly, as well as our project team, to keep this moving forward for the kids. The first selectman negotiated the cost and scheduling with Eversource, and we determined that the interior cafeteria renovation could be completed before school started. Again, a critical component of the project was making sure that we didn't have to feed kids out in tents on the field. So that additional scope just looked like, I have in bold there, just adding a goal number 4, moving the duct bank and the utility lines. But we also moved our construction schedule back, so we officially started construction this time on June 25th of 2018, and with the goal of ending in the total project in late fall of 2018. We broke into 3 projects functionally. The interior renovation, which was to be completed in time for school and was. The actual movement of the power lines, which needed to be completed by the end of July, so that we could begin the actual expansion of the cafeteria late July, early August, and finish that, what we'll call fallish. The budget for this new set of projects was $1.95 million, though we did track those financials separately. Okay. So, looking back on your finances, again, you can see in that first yellow line, we started at 1.689. We received an additional appropriation of $262,000, leaving us with a full appropriation of $1.951359. So that was the project start. So our project successes, first and foremost, we met the 3 original project goals for the cafeteria. If you look at your pictures, in the interior view, you can see some of the things that we did. You can see some of the seating. You can see the nano doors on that first picture. And those are doors that open out to the cafeteria, providing not only a beautiful space, but also more flexibility. You can see in the picture to the right, a banquette over on the far right. You can see some tables stacked together. You can see counters. And you can also see, that's another view of some of the acoustical treatments. You turn to the next page. Again, you can see a counter more clearly, another view of the flexible seating. You can see the wave panel in the back, which is on the right, which is an acoustical treatment, and on the left, the word blue. That's actually an acoustical panel. And up top, those long, thin white lines are also acoustical panels. And actually, interestingly, those panels along the ceiling are what is the most effective. That's the biggest treatment that made the biggest impact to the space. They don't look that imposing, but they really did make a big difference. Turning the page, you can see soft seating, that was originally the faculty lounge, and we created a space where kids could have lunch, but it could also go and do some homework or have a little team meeting or a meeting with faculty, and they do seem to use it in a variety of ways. On the right, you see the green roof, which was one of the alternates on the project, and the purpose of that was to extend the life of the roof and also create some internal temperature control. And then lastly, some additional pictures of the exterior of the cafeteria. Looking in, again, you can see the nano doors. You can see how beautifully it looks from the outside. And you can see the very last thing we completed on the right, which is the coating on the asphalt. So where we had stamped the asphalt, we've now painted it. And that was the last thing we had to do. It's done. Okay. Our second success we were really excited about. We were able to handle that power line move. It got done, and it got done in time. Again, I'll repeat again, so the kids got into the cafeteria on time. We were out of the way, and we just had to do the expansion. The project ran under budget. If you go back to your financial spreadsheet, we are really pleased to be returning $52,437 to the town of Darien, and that's on the right in yellow. We couldn't be more thrilled. And so that's something we'll take credit for, but also our project team needs to be thanked for, and certainly the selectmen helping us work with the utilities companies also made a difference on that line item. Okay, school stayed operational throughout the construction despite delays. We had an active dialogue with fellow town boards, which we were excited about, as well as participation with the Board of Finance. And lastly, we did deliver final project documents, including as-bills and warranties, et cetera. So on that last note, if you'll turn over, one of our big challenges, as we know, was the lack of as-bills. The fact that we didn't know the power line was there. That had a big impact on both the timing of our project as well as the financial bottom line. I note that, of course, that's critical, and we have turned in as-bills. But the other thing that we did want to mention is that not only did we not have them from the time of the build, but we also found an additional fiber optic line that had been added. So it is important not only that as-bills exist at the time of creation, but also that they are updated as smaller changes happen. A second thing that we would add as a challenge and a consideration is that ensuring appropriate safety and security measures are in place for an active school site is something that requires a fair amount of oversight and careful planning. The level of background check that the project team and the school administration agree to is fairly critical, for example. We also found that in order to keep the school site active at places, for example, we had to build bridges over the actual duck bank where it was being dug. And these are the kinds of things you might not need to do in other areas if you can kind of cordon it off. But if you're running an active school site, you have to keep it, you have to make it usable. There was certainly an impact of scheduling around school time. I think nobody will be surprised by that. And lastly, we are all in agreement that the value of constructing the building committee with real construction expertise in addition to town governmental officials and school or town staff, particularly when there's not a full-time construction manager. We're thrilled to have it done, but we certainly think that the Ox Ridge model is a great one to follow, where you've got some people who really do know their stuff, and we think that's exciting. So with that, thank you so much. And if there are any questions, I'll take it. Otherwise,
It's excellent. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Questions from the board? No?
No, I just
questions?
want to thank you for leading this complicated project that should have been pretty straightforward, complicated. So thank you for navigating through everything and working with everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of challenges, as you pointed them all out tonight, and I think it was a fantastic outcome. Thank you to you, to the entire Board of Education, to Jim Palin, who diligently sat with you through all of that. So we're grateful on behalf of the students and the town for this great project. I want to ask Kate, should we take a vote tonight to officially disband the committee?
I think they'd appreciate that.
yes.
Okay, so I will make a motion to thank the building committee on behalf of the Board of Selectmen in the town, and to also move to disband the committee of their official duties with all the boxes checked on the project closeout. So seconded. All those in favor? Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should add that
Good luck with the next one.
state law now requires as-built drawings.
That's good.
It's good.
Part of
Glad to
their,
hear
it's
it.
part of their mandate when you go ask for grant funding.
Really?
Yep.
That's great.
Perfect.
Good for the state.
I wouldn't go that far.
Thanks so much, Jill. Okay, our next order of business is new business to discuss and take action to approve the bond authorization for Ox Ridge. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing my report, my riveting first selectman report. I do have a fair amount to report, so thank you. Okay, I'll go quick because we have a lot of work to do. I want to thank the Parks and Rec Department for a fantastic 3rd annual Weed Beach Fest and 10th anniversary celebration of the donation by the Darien Foundation to fund the Playground by the Sound. It was a great day. I don't know how we lucked out on 2 fabulous weekends right in a row, but we did. It was awesome. Breaking news, the legislature, the House is voting on the state budget as we speak. So I just got off the phone with Terry Wood, and a couple of highlights for you, which you may or may not already know. In no particular order. There's no anticipated income tax increase. Great news. There will be new sales taxes on some goods and services, notably digital downloads. Minimum wage will increase over the next 4 years to $15. Paid family medical leave will become a new mandated benefit for any business that has 1 or more employees. The budget cuts $200,000 out of spending. It will include a 1% conveyance tax on all homes in home sales in excess of $2.5 million, and that is in addition to the already existing 1.25% conveyance tax on any homes sold over $800,000. There will likely be a tax increase on pass-through business entities. The ECS formula, as we know it, stays in place, and over the biennium, they will add $112 million to education spending. The business entity tax, $250 business entity tax, will be eliminated. There are plans in the budget to have community college be free by the year 2020. There's going to, and this is good for RTM members to hear this, I'm sure some of your committee members already know this, there's going to be a 10-cent charge on all plastic bags. And in 2 years, plastic bags will be banned. There's no charge on paper bags. And those revenues will go to the general fund. The budget will raise the age for consumption of tobacco products from 18 to 21. The good news, really good news, and many of us have lobbied for this, there's no push down of the teacher pension cost onto municipalities. However, the budget does re-amortize teacher pension debt, and that will result in significant increase in debt over a period of time, but it smooths out those payments in theory. Over the biennium, overall spending will increase next year by 2.4% and the following year by 2.3%. And there's now no cap on bonding for transportation projects, and I think the debt diet has largely gone away. So those are the sort of the really high-level budget notes. I'm sure there'll be much more in the press later tonight and tomorrow, and looking for those things that will undoubtedly be in there that will impact local government and local boards of education, and it'll take us a little while to digest all of that information. I'd like to recommend and announce tonight that I'm looking for volunteers to populate an advisory committee for planning of bike routes in the town of Darien, working with folks from the town of New Canaan and staff at Westcog. We're looking to create a demonstration project of intermunicipal bike connectivity, and so I'm calling all bike enthusiasts who might be interested in that, and anybody in particular with a planning background would be really great. I do have a list of people already, but don't be shy, give me a call if you're interested. We want to congratulate the following officers for their promotions in the police department. Sergeant Nick Aranzulo has been promoted to lieutenant. Officer Derek Mulcahy has been promoted to sergeant, and Officer Daniel Scombros has been promoted to sergeant. Those promotions were effective yesterday. And now the vetting for a new police chief will begin. Job description updated, and interviews will happen so that we can identify our next police chief. We want to thank and congratulate the Darien High School juniors, Kelly Niederreither, Will Harmon, and Charlie Caleri, for collaborating on the logo that will be used for our town's bicentennial celebration next year. We also want to thank Sarah Kina for bringing the kids together on this important project. And in case you haven't seen it, this is the awesome logo for our bicentennial. What's really exciting about this, too, is the kids came up with the concept, but graphic designer West Bielstein, he was a DHS class of 2014 graduate, put it into sort of this more polished design form. So I brought a copy of these for everybody. And I know that people will be asking to use this logo in a variety of ways over the coming year. You'll see it in swag items, you'll see it in banners in our downtown. Anybody's welcome to use this logo, and I think I might have already heard that the Board of Ed wants to use it in their budget book for next year, so that's very exciting. Let's see, Flag Day celebration will be here at Town Hall June 14th at 4:30 p.m. Please join us if you can outside at the Veterans Memorial Circle. And I think we all can agree that we had great fears over the bridge replacement project at Exit 9. An engineering marvel. Hopefully you can drive by and see the new section in the northbound lane. The old section in the southbound lane will be replaced this coming weekend. The bypass lanes worked beautifully. The one thing that I would say is we don't want people to stay home and not shop and dine in Darien. There might have been some reluctance to do your normal Saturday business, so please, next Saturday, business as usual. And I really want to say thank you to Connecticut DOT for the great communication and incredible planning on a very complex project. Anything for you, Kate?
Just quickly, we're wrapping up employee evaluation meetings tomorrow. And at your next meeting, we'll have the pay plan for fiscal 19-20 to present to you. And Jen and I were both out at the Government Finance Officers Association convention last week, or 2 weeks ago. So we've already started thinking about the next budget. We've got some ideas on how we can improve the process, particularly the capital budget. So I know it's a long ways away, but we're already thinking about next year.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to new business to discuss and take action to approve the bond authorization for the Ox Ridge Elementary School. I would like to ask up front, though, if we could readjust our agenda so that we could take 6A, 6B, and, 6A, 6C, and 6D all at the same time. So essentially, I'd like to move the gift of the running track to the final item here so that we can have some continuity with the Ox Ridge Elementary School project. So may I have a motion to rearrange those items? Susan moves. May I have a second? Pam, all those in favor? Great. Okay. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Kip and Duke, co-chairs of the building committee. We have other building committee members here too. Take it away. Just one announcement. So I'd like for the building committee to finish their presentation to the Board of Selectmen. Then I would like the Board of Selectmen to be able to ask their questions. And then we welcome any questions from members who are here on behalf of RTM or other bodies. We really want to make sure that you're comfortable by the time you leave here and that you've asked the questions that are top of mind this evening.
Is Kate sitting down there? I'll just move it. Oh, here, Mark. Sit in Kate's seat.
Yeah, Pam can't see it, though, for sure.
Shift a little. Pam, you all right?
I'm good. Come on. There's another chair back there if we need to.
Can you see? Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Swing it both ways. What? Don't start messing with that.
I'm sorry. Claire.
Yes, Clara?
Any more handouts?
Should be coming around.
Okay. I didn't bring my present. Thank you all for coming. We're going to talk, Duke and I are the co-chairs of the Ox Ridge Building Committee.
First, Mark.
And we're going to try to answer 5 questions for you tonight. Basically, what's the background on the Ox Ridge School project? Who are the members of the building committee and what has been done so far? Why are we asking for this appropriation now? What is the basis for the appropriation amount? And what's the potential amount of money that we might be able to get from a state grant? In other words, does it really matter? So by way of background, a quick background of this whole project. In September of 2016, the Board of Education retained KG&D to study and create a master plan for examining the needs of the entire school district. The study came back with 3 important things to look at. One were location of the early learning program. Second was Ox Ridge Elementary School. The third was the elimination of portable classrooms throughout the town. Ox Ridge is the newest of the old elementary schools. It was constructed in 1966. Was added on to in 76, and then finally an addition was put on in 96. The master plan identified projects costing over $5 million just to simply keep this 50-year-old building running without addressing any of the space needs or the educational needs. KG&D also opined that due to the age and quality of the original building, it was more cost-effective to replace than it was to renovate. I emphasize the quality because I think a building built in 1965 with a California design in New England doesn't make any sense. Other factors included code upgrades, more efficient energy systems, security, accessibility, end of life of the existing mechanical systems, HVAC improvements, and hazardous material abatement. Also, considerations were about the modernization of the instructional space and the consolidation of the early learning programs, allowing for the better use of resources. In the spring of last year, the Facilities Committee of the Board of Education discussed all of this. There were public hearings, and they approved to move forward on replacing the school. In the fall of last year, they developed and presented to us, the Board of Education presented to the first selectman the ed specs and their request to form a building committee. And we did that, and then by February, the committee was seated, a charge of responsibilities was created, and the committee was off and running as of February. The committee also, members of the committee also toured both the Oxford School and the Tokenie School to see the contrasts and the problems and the discrepancies between a new building and an old building. Who are the members of the committee? Well, we have myself. I'm representing the Board of Selectmen. I was on the Garage Building Committee. We have Duke Deneen as co-chair, Board of Education. He was on the Facilities Committee of the Board of Education. Now he's vice chair. Michael Alfieri, he's a neighbor, lives right by the entrance of Oxford School. Michael was a consultant for many years and now has his own construction business, interestingly enough. Diane Boston, who is a registered architect, now doing master's work in environmental forestry. She's been the lady that's really led our entire effort with the architect, choosing the firm and getting our initial way underway with that group. Randy Giraldo, he's not here tonight. He started his life in the building and the contractor field. He decided there was more money to be made in managing money, so now he heads up a $30 billion real estate portfolio for TIAA CREF. Katie Lubin, who's right here, she's a vice chair of the PTO at Oxridge, been a major help in putting this presentation together. Rusty Schreiner, who's not here, matter of fact, he's going to be at Normandy on June 6th, the 75th anniversary. Rusty was chair of the middle school building committee. It was brought in on time and under budget. Rusty also manages a business which provides consulting advice and construction advice for ice rinks around the country. And John Zagrodsky, the chair of the Board of Finance, who was also on the garage building committee. The other people, and this is important to know, the ex officio members of our committee are deeply involved with our work, and we use them all the time. And here's the list of them. You know them all: Jamie Stevenson, Kate Bush, Jennifer Chernesky, Dr. Elliot Landon, Tara Ockman, head of the Board of Education, Michael Lynch, Director of Facilities, Mike Feeney, Director of Finance, and Luke Forshaw, Principal of the Oxford School. We utilize these people all the time, and they are able to come to any of our meetings, whether it's a special meeting or whether it is an executive session, and they've been extremely helpful. So you should know that we have a full range of people helping us on this project, not just a group of people who are on the committee itself. First thing we did, we reviewed the ed specs with Dr. Landon, especially the ed specs as they pertain to the early learning program. We went through the town permitting process with Jeremy Ginsburg, and we emphasized the importance of expandability and flexibility in school design. This was critical at the middle school, where they had these projections of what the student enrollment would be, but they decided to build the common spaces larger, and thank God they did, because now the school has more students than they planned for. They also built in expandability by having all the utilities already capped out to go through a wall if necessary. The committee also contracted for a series of consultants: site survey update, traffic study, hazardous materials survey, and geotechnical testing, which is basically boring and water sampling. So the first thing we did after all of that was we got down to hiring an architect. We put out an RFP. We got 11 architectural firms and design firms that responded. We chose 6 to interview. We interviewed all 6. We then narrowed it down to 3 finalists, and we assigned the 3 finalists a project, specifically about the difficulty of building a new school on that site while a school was in session. On May 9th, the finalists made their presentations, and they essentially provided 4 conceptual designs each. conforming to existing zoning regulations under the new proposed MU zoning regulations, as well as a phased building project and a non-phased building project. After all of this, we unanimously selected the SLAM Collaborative out of Glastonbury to be our architect. We thought we had some very good candidates. I'd like to have now Diane show you just a few slides to give you some orientation to this whole process.
So this is just one of many of the images that the architects have put together for us, but this is displaying the existing conditions at Ox Ridge. It's a three-dimensional image of the existing school. The first order of business was really to identify the challenges that we have on the site, and drawings like this really helped us start understanding the site. We'll go on to the next slide and can start talking about the site challenges, some of which we're aware of and some of which became more aware of in the presentations from the architects, include an extremely steep sloped site, which you can see by this one drawing one of the architects created for us, which demonstrates the change in elevation from 248 all the way down to 180 on the site, and the cross through of the existing school. This also demonstrates the proximity of residential neighbors and the importance of considering the scale, views, and screening in order to be good neighbors to our existing residential neighbors. In addition, one of the big challenges of the site, as you'll see when we get back to the plan, is the limited site access. There's a very narrow road, which is going to be a big issue during construction work in order to maintain both a safe environment for the school and allow the construction process to happen. Let's see. In addition, another issue is that the existing single-story school location we found really occupies the most desirable location on the site, of course. So this is something that we're going to really have to manage, and so we're going to have to look at a lot of different designs that give some serious consideration to where we're going to build in order to keep the construction phase down, the length of time that the construction takes down, but at the same time really put the school in the best location for the long term. The new school is going to require more square footage than the existing one because the school is based on the education specs design, which is based on enrollment projections and the consolidation of an early learning program. So not only is the challenge where to put the school on the site, but that we need more space than we have currently. So then, in addition, just the new school siting should maximize school safety, optimize vehicular and pedestrian traffic, provide space for fields and playgrounds, and make possible future building expansion. So we really felt this presentation by the architects really helped us to start zeroing in on the site challenges and learning about that. And this is a drawing that SLAM had created for us to start to just really look very carefully at the site. This is the existing school location. And just looking at all the different possibilities, looking at the slope, looking at the narrow access, existing playing fields, and future potentials.
So after we got the architect hired or chosen, we then went after the construction manager. We first discussed what role we wanted of the construction manager to play, and we determined that it would be a construction manager at risk. This approach would, once you have all your subcontractor bids in and finalized, result in a guaranteed maximum price contract, or a GMP, for the project, which is how we did the garage, and it's a way of really making sure that the risks are properly managed. An RFQ was issued and 8 firms responded. A subcommittee narrowed that down to 3. We interviewed all 3 finalists, requested and evaluated their RFPs, conducted reference checks, and we chose the joint venture of O&G Industries and AP Construction on May 17th. This joint venture constructed the Middlesex Middle School in Darien, the Darien High School, the Darien Library, and AP constructed the town garage. So we have a lot of experience with this group, and they have a very strong reputation in the state. So this is where we hit the fulcrum here. A town-sponsored project. Typically, town-sponsored project begins with a charge to and a creation of a building committee, who in turn hire architects, engineering firms, and a construction manager, and then various consulting firms as needed. After all of these engagements are in place, large projects typically follow this phase. And it's probably hard to read, but I'll go through it real quick with you. First, we get initial appropriation to cover the pre-construction fees. We've done that with a $3 million appropriation. Then we have conceptual drawings, schematic designs, design development, and finally you get to your construction drawings, which are the detailed drawings that you send out to the subcontractors for bids. This whole area that I just described here, including the subcontractor bidding process, is called pre-construction. It can take up to a year. As a matter of fact, in most school projects, the architects will tell you it takes a year because you're going back and forth to the state on after every single phase. After the bidding and the finalization of the construction contract, you have an appropriation for the full amount of the project and a bonding approval. And then you have construction and closeout. However, in order to qualify for reimbursement from the state of Connecticut, and for some portion of the cost of this total project, the logical phasing is revised by the state. The state requires, instead of following this order, and this was the order we followed, by the way, in the garage project, requires that an application for a construction grant must include an appropriation authorization for the full amount of the project, a project that has yet to be designed, much less quantified by subcontractor bids, and based upon construction drawings which do not yet exist. So we're telling you, we're coming to you with an estimate because the state says that's how you have to do it if you want to get grant money from us. I think Duke will now try to explain the state grant process. I think I've set him up for a real event.
I think my wife just called me.
I bet you did.
Good evening and thank you. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Kip. It's been a great journey so far, and we are here tonight because we are dealing with a deadline. So to give some background, Rusty and I went up and we met with the state and spent some time up there with them. The good news is they're very interested in working with us, and they think we run a great district from an education standpoint. They think we do a great job with our buildings. So positive feedback there, and we were assigned an architect that would work with us through that project. They did recommend that we apply this year. The application for state grants must be submitted to the Office of School Construction Grants and Review by June 30th in order to be considered in the next fiscal year. We deemed it appropriate to follow this and not delay it. By delaying it would take another year before we could apply again, and that would delay the overall project by a year. Applications approved by the Office of Construction Grants and Review are placed on a recommended priority list that is sent to the governor on December 15th of this year, 2019. They're voted upon as part of an education bill in the spring of 2020 with a final grant commitment issued by early July 2020. The good news is throughout this one-year process, as Kip just described, the Oxridge Building Committee, along with the architect and the construction manager, will continue to meet and go through the various phases of the project's pre-construction effort. When we were up at the state, we confirmed the potential availability of state funds for this coming fiscal year, and as I said, it was recommended that we take advantage of that. The application requires a qualified building committee charge, updated enrollment projections, detailed ed specs, and an appropriation authorization for the full cost estimate. Grant funding for Darien District based on approved new school build is estimated right now at 10.71% of reimbursable costs. There's potentially an extra 5% that would be applied to that based on our consolidation and building of the early learning program on that campus. The extra 5% would be specific to the space allocated to the ELP program only. As I said, we're encouraged to file our application with the likelihood that funding rates will further decrease in years ahead, with the possibility of very limited funding as Connecticut continues to deal with budget challenges. To continue to help us through this process, one of the consultants we brought on board was Colliers International. They are very experienced in the grant application process, and they've worked collaboratively with both SLAM and the construction manager that we've hired. A little detail on the school construction process with the grant review. As stated earlier, education specs were done. We actually shared those with the state. Their comment was actually they were some of the best ed specs they've seen compared to some other ed specs that they see submitted to them. Ed specs form the basis for the new school construction. There are minimum space requirements per student that are mandated by the state. These minimums vary by grade. Enrollment is defined by the state as the highest projected enrollment in the next 8 years. That determines the minimum education space requirements of the school. Last November, we just had our enrollment projections updated. Updated enrollment projections for Ox Ridge shows a maximum of 428 students, K through 5, and 150 expected ELP students, for a total enrollment at that school of 578 students. With that, if you were to do the calculations, the state mandated minimum size of education space is about 75,600 gross square feet. Common areas, corridors, entryways, mechanical rooms, and storage areas are not considered as educational space, but are obviously required as part of any school. Just to give you an example, the current school is about 60,000 square feet, and the portables add about another 3,000 square feet to that school, for a total of about 63,000 square feet. The Board of Ed specs project about 81,475,000 gross square feet. When you add corridors, hallways, storage, common areas, and all the other things, it grosses up to about 100,000 square feet. Part of the goal of the committee was to allow the right size classroom, the right size space, the right size common areas, and also room for growth. And also the special needs requirements of a significantly expanded ELP program. Rough estimates of construction and soft costs were lifted from presentations by the 3 architectural firms that were finalists. Obviously, these numbers are based upon very early concepts of school design. It's always a challenge, especially in this process, and knowing the process that we did for the garage in town, to throw out numbers becomes a challenge. But these are numbers based on the architects that we met with. The numbers range from 55 to 60 million before town costs of financing and specialized consulting. The appropriation request of 63 million includes these extra costs. Comparable costs from current school projects are shown on the next slide. South Windsor, Darien, these show the per square footage, all around $500 to $600 per square foot. To talk a little more about the grant, as I said, the reimbursement rate is based on a possible 10.71% of eligible costs. The challenge is when the building size exceeds the state standards, the reimbursement rate is further reduced by a ratio of the state standard divided by the project building size and adjusted. If we were to look at our $100,000 projected school build versus the state standard of $75,600, it would adjust our reimbursement rate to 8.097. The consultant advises that normally 5% of costs are not eligible. The eligibility and non-eligibility of costs continues to change. It's quite an extensive list that's been shared with us. Based on the $59.8 million build, the eligible cost could yield a $4.8 million grant from funding. This does not take into account the potential grant for ELP consolidation.
Other questions?
First questions from the board, if you don't mind. I have a couple, but I'd like to open it up to my board members.
I need a few minutes to digest it before I can come up with too many
Okay.
questions, so.
Pam?
I think for me, in regards to the timing and putting this grant together, if by the time the RTM meets next week, do you still feel like it's viable to get it in by June 30th?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we've worked with Colliers almost daily, and we are in a good place in terms of all the documents. In terms of the funding resolutions, the enrollment, we're working on the more detailed cost projections. They're all done on state forms that have to be submitted through the state portal, but he feels we're in good shape, and Chuck is working directly with the Board of Ed admin too to organize the submittal.
And I guess my second question would be, so let's say we do not get the grant, or we do not get the approval of the RTM to move it forward, would you consider delaying a year, or would you consider starting the build?
We'd have to go back to the Board of Ed and say, what's your priorities? I think the building is in bad shape, and keeping it going for one more year beyond what we planned, it might be, highly disagreeable by the parents there and the teachers, but we'll find out.
Okay, and last question, just follow. In regards to how the architects sort of looked at the phase-in with building while the school was in session and with the wetlands, it seems sort of problematic, but did they come up with some good working solutions that you feel confident would be safe and workable with the neighbors and children running?
I
I
think-
have elementary school children that
They've all done it.
disperse
They all
everywhere.
gave us examples of when they had to work in very close proximity to existing schools, so they're used to that.
Okay.
Number two, I'm not aware if there's big wetlands problems in the areas that we're building. We're finding out if there will be.
Okay.
So I don't think and the phasing, if you have to phase, that can cost more because it takes more time. Time is money. So if you have a very detailed phasing in where it's bit by bit by bit, it's just going to extend your time, it's going to cost more. And it's a question of time and money and the proper design to finally make it work. And that's what we really have to spend a lot of time going over with the experts and the principal and everybody else.
We'll also be back up at the state before our submission to go over everything that we have to date, and that's something we'll have to weigh. If, for whatever reason, the state pushes back or the RTM's not comfortable, we'd have to weigh that $4.5 million grant versus waiting another year for a grant and what the incremental costs would be in construction and pushing the school building
So you
off.
said it was like $5 million to just do the basic repairs to keep the school running. So
Right.
that's
Just
where
to
I was wondering
maintain
it.
That's what the KG&D came up with.
Right, the building
Right.
survey.
Building survey.
Plus, you didn't mention it, but there's some risk to the availability of school construction money for next
Correct.
year.
No, we did say that, I think that it was going to go down.
Yeah, he recommended that we apply this year. I mean, we met with the director up there. He brought out his spreadsheet, and he said, right now, your reimbursement rate would be 10.71% with the potential 5% bonus for ELP. He said, I cannot guarantee that next year. I cannot even guarantee half of that next year, based on where the state lands and where the governor lands with wanting to fund these type of projects.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a critical point.
Right, I think, Kate, the last time we did this, we had what kind of reimbursement rate?
The reimbursement rate for eligible costs was up in the 20% range, so it ended up being around 13 to 14% of the total
Right,
cost.
but it was
It was a
the
much
stated rate
higher
was
rate.
20%.
Yeah.
Now we're down to a stated rate of 10.71%, and we're just going to keep going down.
Go ahead, Susan. Mark.
Thank you for all of this. It is a lot to absorb, but we've heard bits and pieces along the way. So once all the paperwork, because I'm confident that this will all be done by the 30th of June and will be in the docket of the state. The building committee still goes along and you're just in a holding pattern for the funds, but you still operate and continue to do everything that you would do whether you had put that application in or not, correct?
Correct.
So we're not losing any time by any means.
Yeah.
So really, there's only an upside, as far as I can see, about the funding. There's really no downside. So when the RTM is looking at the pros and the cons of, you're not able to button everything up as much as you would have liked to because of this June 30th deadline. There's only a positive that we could end up getting the grant, but if they don't approve, then obviously we've missed that opportunity, whether you wait a year or not, and not knowing what the money is. So obviously, it's critical that the RTM have any questions answered tonight and obviously next week, but I can't see a downside as to why we wouldn't go forward on this. So I don't know if I'm missing something or
We
just
can
taking it too
continue,
simply.
as you said, we can continue with the process up to the point of going out for bid. We could potentially go out for bid in January once we get the okay from the state, but then it's at risk until we get the confirmation letter from the state the following July. But we feel, based on talking to SLAM and APO and G, that aligns with the timelines in terms of what the pre-construction timeline needs to be.
I think it's also important, especially because we're on live audience, that this is really a presentation to us and to the RTM for the funding. This has nothing to do with the final project as far as any concept. I think it's important that the public understands you're a long ways away from the actual design of the building. And I think
There is no design.
right. The more you say that, though, I think you have to educate the public that this is a concept. Go ahead.
It's a concept driven by the state process.
Yeah.
And the state process is driven by ed specs and their minimums that they want for every student. And that's how you really get to all this. That's why they say all you need is a building committee that's fully qualified, you need your ed specs, you need an appropriation, and you need your enrollment.
Mhm.
That's all they care about.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just the reverse of how we would do
Right.
it. So we're talking about a relatively large estimate.
And if we did not go through the grant process, it's still a process for them to approve building a school, because there are state standards that they want to adhere to.
Good to know. Mark, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, but it was really a complaint about the grant process, which is not particularly helpful to this large audience, or even a small one, so
Please write a letter.
I'll pass.
I have a couple detail questions. So you lay out what the enrollment projections are, your 8-year maximum. What's current enrollment?
I didn't bring that with me.
Anybody know?
It's lower than the 428, I believe, right now.
Okay.
Right around.
417? And do you know how many, over and above that, you would have some ELP and typical peers at Oxbridge? Do you know how many students there they are, or are they included in the 417?
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
That I don't know, but I think they have 110 ELP in a couple years. Because it's spread between several.
Only 2 classrooms.
Yeah, I was just, I'm only asking about Oxbridge.
There's only 2 ELP.
Classrooms.
3? There's 3? Okay.
3 ELP classrooms at Oxbridge
Today.
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 There's only 2 classrooms at Oxbridge.
Thank you, Stacy.
They're
Okay.
spread across 3 schools.
That I understand. I'm just trying to focus in on current enrollment today, and then understanding that the idea is to consolidate the ELP for the future at Oxbridge. And again, I'm sorry for the detailed questions. Can you remind me, or anyone from the Board of Ed, because we're here today asking for a project that includes the ELP consolidation, I'm assuming that the parents have all weighed in long ago, not to dredge up, past decisions that have already been made. But I just want to publicly confirm that the parents are on board with the consolidation of ELP at Oxbridge.
It was all discussed at a public meeting.
Okay.
And as far as I know, they're all on board with the consolidation of the ELP program.
Okay.
Well, that's where the ed specs came in, correct?
Correct.
They wouldn't.
Correct. And a presentation was made by the folks that run the ELP program around the efficiencies and the cost effectiveness of having the program on one campus. So
Okay.
that was all discussed at a public meeting, and there were comments from parents.
Okay. This might be a little bit hard for me to describe the question that's in my mind. So looking at the ed specs that were used when, if you even have them, when Oxbridge was constructed versus the ed specs that you use today, trying to do an apples to apples comparison on enrollment to square feet then and what you're proposing, trying to get a sense for how the building is going to differ. Are the spaces generally larger spaces? Is there more square foot allocated to students and for amenities? You don't have to answer me tonight, but it's a question in my mind to try and figure out apples to apples.
But wait,
Yes.
are you talking ed specs or are you talking final design?
I'm
Because final
talking.
design will be programmatically different, possibly.
I'm talking about the ed specs that feed into the reimbursement.
The biggest one is.
Jack, I'm sorry. Sorry. So you don't have to answer me. We can flush it out a little bit later, but I'm really trying to get, at the heart of the cost of the project is related to the square feet that are laid out in the ed specs, and how does the new way of building schools and what the state will allow compared to what we have currently, just so we can get an understanding and maybe evidence to the public that that new construction methods require additional square feet and additional cost, I think is really what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Well, great question. Without getting into the specifics, which I wouldn't want to do, the existing building is 60,000 square
Yep.
feet. So the current ed specs are 82,000 square feet. So that gives you an education, it gives you an idea as to the change in square footage broadly, but
Except, sorry to really go into this a little bit, but we know how many kids we have in the building. We know what the current square foot is. Does current enrollment meet current ed specs, or have we put more students in that space than in theory we should? So I'm not questioning in a negative way. I'm just looking to maybe provide more information to the public about the necessity of this project. I think that this project is critically important to our community for many reasons. Number one in my book is the change in school security protocols and the porousness of the Oxridge Elementary School. So I'm very supportive of this project. Just, we're faced with this crazy situation that we have very little detail, but we have to appropriate $63 million.
We do know that you have 2 classrooms of ELP existing.
Yep.
We're going to have 10. It's going to be 13,000 ed spec square feet of ELP space. Okay? That's what we came through on the ed specs.
Jamie, according to the October 1 enrollment report, there were 88 ELP students.
At Oxridge,
No, district-wide. At Oxford, there were 24.
24. So that means there are 48
There's
students in the
43
program.
Yeah, and there's 64 at 2 other schools.
Okay, great, okay, yeah. Okay, and my last question is on your similar project comparison sheet. Are there other projects that you can point to? I don't know, did that come from the architect, the similar projects?
That came from Colliers.
came from Colliers.
Okay,
Who is working on those projects. But we can try and find more. We will find more.
okay,
I mean, we have a lot to do to put this together in a fast time.
I understand.
I have one more question. Do we have any idea how many other projects might be looking for this? How many other towns are looking for this June 2019 deadline also?
I do not.
Do we have any idea what their record, do we have any idea how many applied last year and how many were accepted?
Is it a competitive grant where we are up against other school districts where they'd be weighing our project with somebody else?
Not the way he explained it. They look at every project that comes across and they base the funding on the formula that they have based on the enrollment and the district.
And did they give you any indication why grants are not granted?
No.
Usually because the comment was that they usually don't have a very good ed spec put together.
Okay.
They're not well organized, they take too much time. But frankly, what the czar up there, I'll call him the czar, is interested in, he's interested in having his budget be spent. And he wants us to come in because he figures we are something he can push forward. So they look, it's not like it's a competitive thing until the money dries up.
Okay.
Right now, they seem to be encouraging us, which must mean he's looking for players to fill up his budget.
Okay.
It's a strange way of the bureaucratic world.
I think you're doing the right thing by pursuing the state grant. I mean, we can't risk leaving $5 million plus or minus on the table. I know that John Zagrodzky sits on your committee. Have you asked the Board of Finance to officially opine on their support for pursuing the state grant?
We have not.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other board questions? Mark? No. Okay. So then I'd like to open it up to the floor to RTM members. Clara?
The cost to the town would be 63 million, right? That's what you want the town, what the appropriation from the town.
That's the total project
Would be the
cost.
total project cost. If you're successful with the grant, the cost would be less than 63
You'd
million.
be reimbursed by the amount of the grant,
Right.
correct?
So would the amount of reimbursement be put towards more things for the school, or would it be reimbursed to the general fund? What would, you know, would it lessen the cost of the school, or would you have this money to use for other things?
No, it's used to lessen the project.
Claire, we have to appropriate the full amount that we're going to spend regardless of the revenue source.
Okay.
So the 63 million is the estimated total cost. So what it would really mean is that we have to borrow less if we get the state grant.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, that's what it is. And just another question, the Education Committee is going to meet after this. If we have more questions, what's the best way of getting the questions to you and getting the answers before we present it to the RTM next week?
We'll have one of our members join you. How about that?
I do think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's important to share that the committee has done an incredible job, methodical job to date, bringing this project forward. The $63 million is a very well-educated guess. So they're hoping that it's the outside number, but it certainly isn't a guarantee. And we won't have that guaranteed price until the project has construction drawings and is out to bid. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the project could come in under that cost or over that cost. And I know that that's not something that anybody really wants to talk about, but I think in fairness, we have to have everybody understand that we're taking a guess here and asking for an appropriation that is as close to the information that the committee and the consultants have to date. Okay? Other questions? Yes?
Peter Marushek, thank you for the presentation. I have 3 quick questions. The first one is, assuming you will get your approval by RTM and you go through the process with the grant, when will the school be built? When do you expect the school to be built in operation?
We expect that it will take about a little less than a year to get to the final bidding process with the and the construction will start after that. The construction will take anywhere between, depending if it's phased or not phased, 30 months or 37 months or longer. We're hoping to have it as short as possible. Our goal is to have the school be open by August of 2022.
And here you described in the presentation that Oxbridge is the newest of the old elementary schools. So when would we expect to have a similar conversation? What do you think? When we a similar conversation about holes and all the other old schools?
I'll refer to the Board of Education. I'm on the building committee for this school.
It's your best educated guess. 5 years later, 10 years later.
I wouldn't even give that an educated guess. We have a master plan that we worked with. The facilities committee met last week to actually start the conversation as to what's next, because one of the goals was to remove the portables. So once we move ELP to Ox Ridge, that frees up some classroom space at the other schools. And then the role of the facilities committee is start to assess what needs to be done at those schools, whether it's a renovation, whether it's an addition, different things like that. But that kind of conversation started last week in the facilities committee.
Thank you. And my last question, when it's all said and done, in the August 2022, we now have $150 million budget and expenses, right, about for the town. What would we expect the incremental cost to be to town of the $60 million bond?
Well, that hasn't been determined yet, because I know that our Director of Finance, Jen Chernuski, wants to work on that. We don't have that information yet. We don't even have a solid number yet, and we're trying to work to schedule it. Clearly, the bonding is going to take place well after the first year. I mean, the first bonding of the $3 million probably now, but the construction won't be starting until at least a year from now, at the earliest. So I would say that we're going to work that whole thing through. Jen Trubisky is going to work it through to come up with what will be the impact on taxpayers when the bonding starts.
Yeah, and that's, the Board of Finance is the one who determines the bonding, and they have some flexibility in the maturities. So they could go out 20 years, and with schools, they actually could go out longer than that now. So, but they will work on it to make sure that they're trying to keep the budget impact minimal. So you're going to look to the Board of Finance for those answers.
I would also like to interject that at some point, I would assume that the RTM and the rest of us will be interested to look at per square foot operating costs for the current facility in relation to a much larger facility that might be more energy efficient, and just do that comparison about operating costs into the future. Bert?
Kip, did the committee consider an alternative way to address the situation and do without the government subsidy, because you would save time, you don't need your consultants, you can be much more efficient, and you give the RTM and F&D more time to look at the project. $5 million might be eaten up by delaying the project going through the government process.
Well, first of all, the government will be looking at all of our stages, whether we ask for money or not. It's required that we go back to them after every phase, the design development phase, the schematic phase, whatever, and they will want to go through all of that every time, because they want to ensure the school meets the state standards. Well, it doesn't matter whether we're asking for their money or not. So there'll be no less time because of that process. We're able to, after we get through the initial phase of maybe design development, we can start doing construction drawings. So we're not going to be held back in any time by virtue of going for the grant, because we're going to move right ahead. The only thing we do is we either get the money or we don't. And so I don't think there's going to be any delay by virtue of going for the grant. The delay is going to be because there's an inherent bureaucratic approval process of every step in building a school, money or no.
How about the cost of Collier? I think Bert mentioned
The
that.
cost of Collier is nominal. We're paying, I don't know if it's say publicly, $5,000 for his efforts. That's not a lot of money.
Other questions? Now's the time. Jack?
Can you confirm, because we've discussed it in the last two tours, that one of the big changes in specs from Oxbridge when it was built to now is that classroom sizes have to be 900 square feet, which was not the case when we built it. Many of our classrooms are under that. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
So that accounts for a lot of the extra space.
And the ELP, Jack, because we're putting
yeah.
what is it, 15 students into 1,000 square foot per classroom. That's a big number.
And ELP has been, if I'm not mistaken, growing over the last 5-6 years. Every year that I'm looking at it, it's getting larger and larger. So 150 projection is not unrealistic based upon the current glide path. I have a question for just looking out into the future. When Dr. Brenner was here, one of the things we talked about is how to bring our current buildings up to date with the electrical systems, because things have changed with Wi-Fi and other technology systems. And he had his last school, it was like a $9 million, some astronomical number, so we figured out patches on how to do it. Is part of the construction concept, and I don't know because you're sort of looking into the future, but to allow for the technology that we don't know today to be implemented 20 years, 30 years down the road. And how do we do that?
That's part of the philosophy of flexibility. How we do it, Jack, is another question. I haven't got the answer today.
I'm just, as long as the committee is considering that in construction, that's all I care about, because it's a best guess.
At best.
Yeah.
We looked at schools, we toured some schools that were built by the architects that were finalists, and we went into the library, now called the media room, and here was one wall of computers all lined up against the wall. That's obsolete. Everyone's now got a pad. The whole bank was basically, had been in 5, 6 years turned obsolete. The
Right.
technology really is having a huge impact.
And each of the architects spoke specifically about the consultants or the in-house people that they brought on board to constantly stay in tune with changing technology, whether it's Chromebooks, whether it's iPads. So that's all kind of been built in, to their programs.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes.
Hi, Sarah Newman. I have a question about, where can go to project costs. I can completely understand and appreciate this is an educated guess that you don't know exactly what it would cost, and it may cost more to be built. Would it benefit us, and I don't know if these costs are reimbursable, but to building costs such as the cost it would be to be able to run Oxbridge as a school while this is being built, the project overrun costs, the ability to kind of build in for errors, such as what happened with the high school with the power. Are any of those costs eligible for the grant or no? If we were to build in kind of the cost.
Well,
Contingency costs.
Yes, thank you.
You do contingency planning. I mean, for example, a typical contingency numbers are, before you've done your design development, you have an 8%, you estimate how big your building's gonna be, what you're gonna put into it, you do your cost numbers, and you throw out 8% for design development contingency. When the design is finalized, that contingency goes away. Then you have your contractor's contingency, usually 5%. Then you have a 5% at the town level for all of its unknowns. So we have right now concept of maybe 16% of contingencies built in, plus a 4.5% escalation of material costs. Because we're starting today, we're not going to be building for another year and a half. What's it going to cost for the steel at that time? What happens if tariffs impact dramatically the cost of materials? So you have about 20% built-in contingencies in the thought process. That doesn't protect you completely, but that certainly is part of the stuff that you submit as part of your costs. Yes. I don't think I answered your full question.
No, I just wanted to know if those kind of contingency costs would be built in, or are they eligible for a project, grant from the state or not?
They're part of your building cost. As long as they fit into eligible costs, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Claire?
In the past, some value engineering has turned out to be more costly in the long run. What is your committee doing, or have you decided, to kind of prevent last-minute value engineering issues from doing some harm to the project?
There's two types of value engineering. One is the wrong type. That's called cost cutting. You set a number up here, whoops, we can't get there, we got to figure out what we got to throw out to be able to beat that number. We're trying not to do that. Number two, good value engineering is saying that table, we've spec'd it out with a marble top. No, we can do it with a Corian top. We can save several $100s. It works just as well, whatever. That's good value engineering. That's the kind of stuff you want to do for value engineering. But value engineering has gotten a bad name because so often it is, we've got to meet this number. We didn't know how we got there, but we got to get beneath it somehow and throw stuff out. No, we're not going to do that stuff.
You're not going to do the cost cutting?
We're not going to do the cost cutting. We're going to do the value engineering, which is finding better materials for the same cost at lower cost. I mean, better materials at a lower cost.
The best protection that we have against value engineering for this project is that John Zagrodzky is on the building committee. And he stated several years ago that the Board of Finance will no longer tolerate value engineering that jeopardizes the project in the long run. Yes?
Sorry. Oh. I know it's because we're doing the whole thing in sort of a mishmash order. I'm assuming that this proposal, this number, anticipates that we're building on the flat part of the field that's unoccupied right now? Or
Don't count on it. No.
Okay. So it covers if we have to relocate the kids and build where the school is now?
Well, you would phase it, that would be a phasing, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But we don't know which way it's going to be. Obviously, if you do extensive phasing, it's going to be a more expensive project. Okay? So the 63 is contemplating the worst case.
Okay.
We're hoping, but we don't know.
Good point. Jack?
I appreciate the comment that John confirmed that at our FME meeting. But the other thing that, for those of the RTM who are here, one of the things that we have gotten a commitment from, and we heard it in the presentation, is that we will get our public works garage number. And when they have that, they will be coming back to the various government bodies, including the RTM, to say, here's our final number with the various contingencies. Here's what it's going to be. And by the way, if it's more, we need more money. And if it's less, you don't need to change the appropriation. We'll just come in at less money because we're not bonding 63 million tomorrow. We bond it as we have spent the money. So if we don't spend the money, we don't do the bond, and the bond goes away. The bond for the authorization that we didn't use, it goes away.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, last call for any other questions. If not, we'll move on to our rearranged agenda. Actually, we will first take up as a board the resolution to amend the resolution adopted on May 13th, 2019, appropriating $3 million for the... I'll just wait a second. Sorry. Okay, we're going to continue with our agenda items, and the first item germane to the presentation that we just had was Board of Selectmen discussion and vote on amending the resolution. We approved a resolution on May 13th appropriating $3 million for the planning and design construction of a new elementary school, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes. And tonight we're asking to amend that resolution to increase the scope of the project and the appropriation and bond authorization by $60 million for a total of a $63 million appropriation and bonding resolution. With your permission, I'd like to waive the reading of this resolution, and I'll entertain a motion to approve. Pam? May I have a second? Susan? Any further discussion on this bond resolution or authorization? No further discussion by the board? All those in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we will endeavor to move on. So now we're going to take up item 6C, which is discuss and take action to request a mandatory referral for the Oxridge Elementary School. As you are, I'm sure, aware, a building project of this nature on town property requires that the Planning and Zoning Commission make a determination, an affirmative determination, that this building project conforms to the town plan of conservation and development, and that is a requirement of Connecticut General Statutes 8-24. So I will entertain a motion to refer this to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Kip? May I have a second? Mark? All those in favor? Great, thank you. And item 60, discuss and take action to increase the size of the Oxridge School Building Committee to 8 members, making the alternate position a regular member position. And I'd like to turn it to Kip to just give us some background on the request.
Yes, well, Katie Lubden has been our alternate member, as originally chosen. We've had a lot of work that we've done. We've done a lot of work in smaller subcommittees, bringing it back to the main committee. Katie has been a very active participant and very useful. She helped tremendously putting this presentation together. and I feel that it's reflective of her effort that we ought to have her just be a full-time member of the committee. It just helps us get more things done, rather than being an alternate. Now, we've usually had one person or two people at most miss a meeting, so she's been voting anyway. I mean, she's been acting like a full member, and I just think that she's been very, very effective and helpful, and I think that it would be helpful to have her as a full-time member.
I agree. I've seen her in action. She's making great contributions to the effort. Is there any further discussion about adding eliminating the alternate position and making that a permanent position?
My only question, Kip, I don't think it's an issue to have 8 members if you ever have to vote on anything. I can't imagine it would be a tie.
I'm looking for another.
Okay. So ultimately, you might wish to have 9.
I would like to have 9. I'm looking for somebody with construction skills specifically to bolster Rusty and Mike.
Okay.
And do we know if it has to be a Dem or a Republican? Or
I don't know.
do we know what the numbers are? I mean, like
We would, if we were adding a 9th member, we would make sure that it conformed to our majority-minority representation rules.
Wonderful.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to increase the size of the Oxford Elementary School Committee to 8. Susan moves. May I have a second? Pam? All those in favor? Great, thank you. Okay, now we will go to item 6B, which is discuss and take action to accept the gift of a running track from the Darien Athletic Foundation, and we have Jen Montanaro is here again this evening. You might remember that we've already received a presentation on this, and we took a sense of the meeting, and we were unanimous in our support for accepting the gift of the running track. We have a resolution before us. I will just read it out loud for the public record.
You have the updated one.
I don't know if that's updated.
You got the right one.
Okay.
not the one with the car in it.
Not the one with the car in it, no.
Pursuant to Section 2-33 of the codified ordinances of the Town of Darien, the Board of Selectmen is empowered on behalf of the town to accept gifts provided that the gifts do not have a value in excess of $10,000. Pursuant to that section of the code, the town said gifts in excess of $10,000 may be accepted with action by the representative town meeting. And the Darien Athletic Foundation wishes to donate a running track to the Town of Darien and the Darien Board of Education. The value of such donation has been determined to be $300,000. The Board of Selectmen wishes to accept this gift to support the Parks and Rec Commission and the Board of Education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Darien hereby authorizes the acceptance of this gift and directs that this resolution be forwarded to the representative town meeting for its consideration and approval. I just have one process question on this. I don't know when the Board of Education is approving this gift. Jen, do you mind coming up here? In the best case scenario, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the Board of Finance would be approving the receipt of this gift before it moved to the representative town meeting. So where are we in all of those processes?
Well, right now, thank you for your acceptance of this. We are now meeting with some of the subcommittees of the RTM. In fact, I'm meeting with Finance and Budget and Parks and Rec, and then hopefully scooting down to Education as well to give them a preliminary discussion and overview of what this project is all about. We then hope to go before the full RTM on their next meeting on June 10th, I believe it is, and then either to the Board of Education for acceptance of the gift on June 11th or their subsequent meeting following that, which would be the second or third week in June. I can't recall the date off the top of my head. And then they would accept the gift, hopefully.
Okay, so how about the Board of Finance? Have you been to the Board of Finance?
You don't have to.
They don't have to.
It's not a gift of cash, so the Board of Finance has no.
Okay, so just to be clear, the what-ifs. What if the Board of Education does not approve this gift after the RTM approves this gift?
Well, I'm a glass half full kind of gal. And what if? That's a great question. Jamie, thank you for asking that, but I don't know the what-ifs. I think what we would have to do is find out why. What are the reasons why? And like we've always done in the past with any of the gifts that we've done, we work with them and figure out how to make this happen. And if it's, I don't know. I don't really know. Don't even want to speculate, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, all of our indications thus far have been very positive. We've had open dialogue from the beginning. We do constant updates about where we are in terms of the process. We've been bringing this, we brought this forward about 4 years ago. It was the first time I think I was here, and I don't even remember, to be honest with you, who the superintendent was then. I think it was after, Steve Falcone, I'm not sure. But so we've talked about this. We've massaged all the comments that we've had through multiple boards on the Board of Education. I think that we've been very encompassing of all the suggestions. So I can't imagine there being a what if.
So this is maybe a question just specifically for the DAF.
Okay.
Should we assume that in that situation where the Board of Education might not approve this gift, that the gift to the town, for the town portion of this track, would no longer go forward? The gift to the town for the piece that's on the Diller property seems directly contingent on the approval of the entire project.
Yes.
And while we can only talk about how excited we are about the gift that you're giving to improve the Diller property, they're inextricably connected. So is it fair to make that assumption that were the Board of Ed to not approve, then the project in total fails?
Yes. That's a correct
Thank you for
assumption.
clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Board questions? Mark, Pam?
We talked about
Yep.
it last time. I think we
Yeah.
got all of our questions answered last time.
Yep. It's a great project.
Phenomenal.
Thank you so much to the
Oh.
DAF for considering the donation to the town. It's really great.
Great. Thank you.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve this authorization accepting the gift of, in value of $300,000.
So moved.
Kip, Susan seconds. All those in favor? Great.
Jimmy, can I just say
Thank you.
one thing?
Yes.
If we can finally use this piece of land, after how many years have we owned it? 30? 30 years. That will be phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for coming out twice. Okay, we'll move on to transfers. Public Works, Town Hall dredging of $135,000 capital project. Ed, thank you very much for your patience.
Slow hold up for him. Did you finish your whole bottle of Gatorade while you waited?
It's not really Gatorade.
We won't ask.
Good evening.
It's water from the dredging. Just to show us, not to drink, to show us.
Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works, here to propose to you a transfer of funds to start and complete a dredging project out here at the Town Hall, the sediment basin on the Stony Brook. As you see, there are 3 existing accounts that we'll be taking funds from. 2 of them are closeouts. I worked with Jen Charneski to go through and clean out some of the projects we had finished. The balance being taken from the capital contingency. $135,000 will be added to the current balance of about $200,000, 205 actually, to cover the low bid of $335,000 from Sumco. Just to cover some facts about how we got to where we are right now. The original capital project was set up to produce permitting for not only the Town Hall sediment basin, but the Gorham's Pond sediment basin just below the bridge at Goodwise River Road. Sorry. We currently do have DEP permits for both locations. We have all local permitting also. Lucia Zakowski, I'm sorry, took care of the permitting part for Gorham's Pond. I handled the local permitting process here for the Town Hall. As we move forward through the capital project piece of it and putting an estimate together, the original estimate assumed a quantity of about 1,400 tons That number is the one I proposed. Doing some final testing and an engineer's estimate using some soil borings and sounding, found that the sediment basin actually was quite deeper. And there's about 2,600 tons in that sediment basin that need to be removed. Included in that design or construction work to be done here, there is a proposal to do dewatering and install a coffer dam. Two items that originally I thought we could get away with not having to do because its location on the a longer, skinnier stream. Access from both sides would have been easier. But going through the approval process for the EPC and the DEP, our engineer felt that I would not get approval from the DEP to do that. So there's additional costs there. That was something that I missed, and I'll take responsibility for that one, but I thought there was an opportunity for the town to do that. So back in 2016, putting together a capital number, I used our estimate just to remove the soils and not do a dewatering activity. So here we are now. We got our approvals in April of 2018. The bids just came in about a month ago, and they're all pretty much around the same, 335, 343, and 396 from three very good companies. I do have a very tight window to do the project. I have to start it in hopefully the end of June if all goes well and the transfers are accepted and approved. I have until September 1st to finish. The Mather Center does need the parking area. We are doing lay down and drying of the sediment in the lower parking area of the Mather Center. There will be access to the facility at all times, but we've carved out a pretty good space so that we could dry the material. The drier the material, less it costs us to remove it and pay for that. Any questions you have for me, I'm here to answer.
Coffer dam? What's a coffer dam?
What is a coffer dam?
Yep.
It is an area, it is generally built up of sandbags, but I've seen people use large concrete blocks. I don't believe you could use mafia anymore as a term. So
Probably not.
So these large blocks are put in, or the sandbags. It is to divert the water away from a certain area. So what you end up doing is creating your own river and protecting the area that you're dredging.
It's temporary.
It's temporary.
Got it, okay, that's enough.
Mark?
Do we have to dredge, maybe it's just a good idea, but do we have to dredge out more because the basin is deeper than we originally thought? Because we were going to dredge out, as you said, 14,000 cubic yards or something like that. And wouldn't that have done the job?
I don't believe that's a proper approach to addressing a sediment basin, the maintenance of it, if you will. It's designed to do what it's doing right now, which is catch the sediment.
Okay.
You keep it from reaching the larger bodies of water, and it does require maintenance. And I'd say it's depending on the size of it and the volume of water, you're looking at somewhere between 8, 10, 12 years. You have to do a maintenance activity on it. So dredging half of the sediment basin would be equivalent to like painting half a room. Right? You're going to come back and finish it eventually, sooner rather than later.
I have a question that I've never asked you, and it's maybe a simplistic, so forgive me, you're an engineer. How do you know where the sediment stops and the river bed begins so that you don't over dredge?
And that's a valid question. It's a good question. Most sediment is organic, or sand, or leaves, or sticks, and this one's been dredged. This area's been dredged before. Most likely, what you're going to find when you get down to the base of the basin, if you will, would be gravel. Some type of larger rocks, rounded rocks, something that a bottom of a river would look like, if you will.
Understood. Okay. So I don't have a copy of the document, but we have in our possession a copy of a document that I think it was drafted by Hank Sanders that lays the responsibility of maintaining the sedimentation basin out here in the Stony Brook and the one in Upper Gorham's Pond on the town. So we probably remember when this one was last dredged. Do you remember the year that was last dredged?
I
Was it 2007,
I
perhaps?
think it was 7, 8, or 9, in that range.
Okay,
It's been about
it
10
wasn't
years.
9, because some of us were here then.
It's,
so-
it's after 2000.
Yeah,
I can tell you that. It was,
Yeah.
it was while, I was here, so.
okay. So, one of the things that we want to try and fine tune as we move on from this particular project and as we look to dredge the basin in Upper Gorham's Pond is what's the right frequency to do this dredging maintenance so that we can begin as a town to maybe reserve for the costs for doing this ongoing maintenance. So I think that this is a critical project for the health of this watershed. And while we can't say that it will have a positive impact on flooding conditions in any way, we do have a responsibility to clean it out, to maintain it, and keep that watershed as well maintained as is possible, so waters can flow properly and it can collect the sediment that it will. Obviously it's been maybe 11 years since we last did it, so we're going to have to be looking at some kind of regular schedule. So any other questions on this
Well,
project?
Isn't it true that we don't have as big a sedimentation problem as we used to when Connecticut DOT was using so much sand on I-95 in the winter?
That's true. That's true. The accumulations have slowed down. Now, the process of going and cleaning out the basins must be done.
Okay.
I think Gorham's Pond's a prime example.
You can see the sand
And
at Gorham's
therein
Pond.
lies the problem. It needs to be cleaned out.
But that's a great segue and time for a public service announcement, because the sediment is not just sand. It's leaves, it's grass clippings, it's other organic materials. So we really need, as a town, to undertake sort of a water course stewardship educational program so that people don't put their organic materials in the waterways that then accumulate in the sedimentation basin.
That's correct.
So, and I've suggested that to EPC, that they take that role on in their role as the Flood Erosion Control Board.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, any further questions about this transfer request? Yes.
Looking forward and trying to plan further dredging and setting yourself up to provide a budgetary number to carry every year. Understand your DEP permits are only good for 5 years. Generally speaking, you don't usually dredge in that period of time, so there will be a requirement that you go back and get either a COP or some type of full DEP permit, I'm sorry.
COP is Certificate of Permission, right? Okay. All right. So I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $135,000 from the combination of capital contingency of $47,167, commercial sidewalk closeouts of $42,791, and the DPW garage design of $45,042 for a total of $135,000 into a dredging sediment basins account. May I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Pam? May I have a second? Susan? All those in favor? Okay, Mark, you look reluctant.
Yeah,
Do you
but
have-
I voted for it.
Do you have concerns? We want you to be able to express any concerns that you have, and for Ed to answer any questions you might have.
This dredging is much more expensive than we expected. And there's a lot of dredging still in the plan, and I can see dredging where it's impeding the flow of water. I don't know if it's impeding the flow of water in this sedimentation pond. But I defer to your expertise.
As
And I
much-
voted for it.
And as much as seeing the river move or waters move down the stream, if you do not give a place for the sediment to settle out, which is what happens as the
Yeah.
river gets wider, it will continue downstream.
Yeah.
The sediment will continue to go. It will make its way to where you don't want it to be, which is a larger body of water, creating an unhealthy environment.
Dredging, not dredging here will mean more dredging downstream.
It'll mean more sediment downstream.
Yes, to be dredged.
To be dredged.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I'm more comfortable having voted for it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Ed. All
Thank
right,
you very
we're all
much.
set with that vote then. Okay, moving on to our appointments and reappointments. First, I'll take up the reappointment of Karen Pollitt to the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission for a term expiring on November 30th, 2021.
So move.
Mark, may I have a second? Susan, was that Susan?
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to look out the side of my eye.
I
All those in favor?
always look over there and see who
Okay,
wants to.
thank you.
resign.
And then I'd like to first take a vote to amend the agenda to take up the appointment of a new member to the Sewer Commission. May I have a motion to amend the agenda? Pam, may I have a second? Kip, all those in favor? Great. So we have a great candidate for the Sewer Commission. There's a vacancy in the Sewer Commission, and we have the appointment of Susan Cameron to the Sewer Commission for a term expiring on 12/31/2020. May I have a motion to approve Susan's appointment? Susan? May I have a second? Kip? All those in favor? Great. Susan will be a great addition to the Sewer Commission with her background in EPC and planning and zoning. Okay, we have meeting minutes of our regular meeting of May 20th.
I do have, I don't know if I have a correction on page 2.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone has
Go
anything
ahead.
before that. So, the last bullet point before the update, it's John Lawler, not Waller.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sorry, these came in late, and I didn't
That's
get a
okay.
chance to look at them before they
Okay.
went out.
Any other corrections or additions?
Oh, also on page 5, it says Mr. Coons said he had been at the boat club meeting. I think it was Mr. Thorne. I don't think Mr. Coons went to the boat club meeting.
I did not.
I think it was Mr. Thorne that said he'd been there.
Thank you.
I wasn't the boat club.
You confirm that you were?
I confirm.
Okay. Anything else?
No, the only, maybe I did say this on page 6. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph. Mrs. Marks asked if everyone in Darien, lives in Darien, is entitled. It should have been eligible to be a member, not entitled.
Yeah.
I don't like that word at all.
Okay. Yep.
I may have said it, but it's just not right.
Thanks.
Any other corrections or additions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Kip, may I have a second?
Second.
Mark, all those in favor? Great, thank you. Okay, special meeting minutes of May 20th.
So moved.
Kip, may I have a second?
Second.
Mark, all those in favor? Great. Okay, agenda review. I have two things for agenda review. Follow through on the request to seat an advisory committee for the bike route planning.
I was going to ask you about.
Exciting. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I also would like to undertake, while you guys are still on the board, trying to determine or craft a community value statement. What is it, what do we believe in as a town? Can we boil that down into a value statement? So I'd need to do a little research on how best we can do that, but would like to consider taking that.
Great.
Jamie, I also have something to add. It's not critical for the next meeting because I know Ed is really busy. It's great to see these new sidewalks going in. Could we at some point have a discussion for him to lay out what the future sidewalks look like.
Love that.
Just so that we're aware of it.
Absolutely.
Location or design?
Location, design,
Thank you.
priorities.
Yep,
Priorities would be
Right, I know
great.
they have, a couple years ago, we saw a priority list of the sidewalks.
I'd love to see that.
Absolutely. And you know, the reason, it's a very good idea, Susan, because I've always thought that we could, if we receive that report and we as a board feel as though we want to be perhaps a little more aggressive in our sidewalk upgrades, reconstruction, new construction, we can set that as a capital project. You know,
Sure.
we can invest more heavily in sidewalk construction. So that's a good place to start.
With all the side, I mean, over exit 10, every day I've been reminded of it, so it's on my
Right.
mind.
Yep. We talk about it all the time, so it'll be good to have that public discussion.
Yes.
Great. Anything else for agenda review? Kip, I know you're a little busy.
The fact you didn't correct
But
the
kudos
minutes.
to you.
yeah,
Things
means-
seem to be going very well.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
They're busy?
Yep.
Yep, we're making good progress.
Okay. Mark, agenda review. I feel like
No,
last time we
no.
cut you off a little
No,
bit.
no, you didn't. I
Okay.
don't think so. I don't feel that way.
Okay. Pam?
No, I'm just really excited about this advisory committee, and I guess maybe, at some point to really say it out to the public what you're looking for, and, again, maybe just remind them who and what.
Since we're on TV, the reminder is that we desire to work in collaboration with the town of New Canaan to plan for a bike route or bike routes between our two towns. And there is a specialist on staff with Western Connecticut Council of Governments who's tasked with regional bike planning. Her name is Holly Parker. We've had one meeting already. We're going to have another call tomorrow. So right now, we're both of our towns are in the phase of finding volunteers to populate this committee, and I think it's fun and exciting, and we will have to decide where the routes are, how we want to demarc them, whether it's sharrows in the road and signs and whatnot. If there's an opportunity for any actual bike lanes, I'm not sure if that's possible. But I think it's an exciting way to collaborate with our neighbor.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's really exciting.
Okay. Okay, so hearing no other agenda review items, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Pam, may I have a second? Kip. All those in favor? Thank you.